I have a couple already in my pocket, but it looks like we're going to be, we have some from the floor. So I think it's always better for me to, I won't use any acronyms, but be quiet and let the audience begin with a question. So please identify yourself and ask your question.
ECN Technology. This question is for Charles. Two questions actually. One is, in your presentation, you said you're looking for integration of your system with the building management system, and I wanted to know why you were looking for an integration with the building management system. And the second is, I wanted to know what strategy you guys adopted to get interconnectivity with legacy systems that have all kinds of different protocols and stuff. Thank you.
Well, the first one's the easy one. The building management systems, we do a lot of business with institutions and their heating, ventilating, and air conditioning systems that operate off the cooling systems and cooling towers. And a lot of the flows and the metrics that are around the operations of those systems are included or monitored by that building management system. And so being able to pull that data out and allow that to be married up with the information that we're bringing from our controllers also in that institution allows us to be able to get those value calculations made. And the second question in terms of the legacy systems is a little more difficult. We've had to develop out a number of different transfer applications, for lack of a better term, to be able to bring data in either from email or from web services or from FTP transfers, other ways of getting the data into our system and then being able to read those particular files. So it's been quite cumbersome, and a lot of it has to be done on an individual one-on-one basis because there really doesn't seem to be a whole lot of standardization in a lot of those legacy systems.
Okay, I don't see any. I'm burning with a question I want to ask John.
Yes, sir.
Could you describe a little bit more the kind of business model relationships you have with, if you call them demand response customers or whatever you call them? Do you intermediate with ERCOT, the grid regulator, or do you, how do you assist them? What's the relationship? Do they work strictly with you and not work with ERCOT, or how does that all work? Can you explain that a little bit?
What happens is that the Texas market is very, very unique in that it's what we call an energy-only market. It's deregulated. So those of you all in different parts of the country will have different market structures. But in Texas, what happens is it's a deregulated market, so there's a lot of different ways that we can monetize for a customer. So some of them involve us being an intermediary between the customer and ERCOT, the people that manage the grid. So that those kind of programs are when there's an emergency, is ERCOT gives us a notification, we push the button, all the generators or all the hospitals and all the customers come off immediately. And then there are other programs that don't involve the grid operator, and those are programs in which when the price of electricity, and what happens in Texas is that when the grid gets stressed, when we've got problems, the price of electricity gets very, very high. So you may have the average price of electricity being $30 a megawatt. That electricity can go to $3,000, can go to $7,000, and it's going to be able to go to $9,000 a megawatt hour next year. So what happens is that when we push the button and take those customers and get them to where they're no longer using electricity off the grid, is that we get them paid those kind of prices for the electricity that they're not using. Okay, so it's a multiple different ways that we do it to generate revenue for the customers.
Okay, so I would take that to say that there's a lot of ways to skin the cat there, and in some sense this is your advisory role and your secret sauce a little bit to structure these deals for the clients so that it works out economically for them.
Right. At the end of the day, what you're doing is that you're controlling what happens on a customer site, whether or not that they're using electricity or not. There is, I wouldn't call it a secret sauce. What I'd call it is that there's a real need for being able to decipher what that customer is really able to do and how to maximize the value for them.
Okay. That's very interesting. Are there any questions from the floor at this point? Because I have a long list, so I'm hoping somebody else. There's one in the back. That's always a good threat. If the moderator says he has a couple more questions, it gets somebody to do it. So please identify yourself and go ahead.
Stephen Lovas from Danaher. John, just building on the discussion there on the business model, can you talk a little bit about where the, I don't know if it's the cost sharing, or does the MUD, for example, in the model that you have, did they pay for the implementation of the system, or do you pay for that and they get it, there's a cost sharing? How does that work?
What we've done, one is that the cost of the equipment has become somewhat, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but not as big of an impediment as it once was. What we've done is that we've come in and made agreements with the customer that we'll install the equipment for them, we'll pay for it, we'll make sure that it's commissioned, we'll make sure that everything is up and running. And then during the course of a period, these are 60-month agreements that we make with a customer, is that over that period, we basically take those funds back from the money that's earned by that particular customer. So it's a shared type of a model is what we have kind of created in terms of how the equipment ends up getting paid for.
Okay, maybe I can fling a related question at you, Charlie, in terms of the how that works for you. What kind of how is the new technology that you brought to your customers, has that changed your commercial contracts with those customers in terms of the length of the contract or the way that they support the installation? How's that affected your business?
I don't think it's really affected it in terms of length of contract or really in terms of the specifications around the contract. I think we may start seeing built into our contracts the need, or that they'll want to have this kind of visibility to their data and to their performance. And so it may be an added capability that they're going to be demanding or requesting when they go out and look at contract business. But I think it's early enough in the implementation, the development of this kind of technology that our customer base is not there yet in terms of having it really influence into the contracts.
Yes, go ahead.
I was going to share with you all is that from a customer retention standpoint, if you're in the service business, once you get a gateway and you're providing a service of this nature to a customer, you will not lose them unless you do something that's very, very egregious and very profound. It just creates a stickiness and an intimacy with the customer that we've never found before with any of the services that we were able to provide.
Interesting. What people might, go ahead. People might call that the annuity, but that's a dirty word, but I understand what you're saying. There's a question out here. Go ahead.
So I did hear what you just said, but assuming a customer does want to leave you, how have you guys thought about how you're going to go in and take your equipment back out? Who pays for that? Is that all built into the contract, or have you not really had to deal with that yet?
Go ahead, just identify yourself.
Yeah, Soren Knudsen, I'm with Intel.
Okay. I'll tell you how we handled it is that we set it up to where if there's a customer that's unhappy with the service, in a month they can get out of the agreement. Okay? Now, if they get out of the agreement before the equipment's paid for, then they agree to pay for the equipment. And the equipment in our case, I think that the average on it's about $4,500 per installation, and most of that is actually labor on the site. So we've had nobody that has taken us up on that. But we wanted to set it up to where we didn't want them to feel like they've got me in a corner and there's no way that I could exit stage left if in fact that I decided that I didn't like these programs.
Questions now? Another question? I've got one. Charlie mentioned technology churn. You have a lot of churn in terms of things changing very fast in the mix of technologies and partners that you have there, a lot faster than you're used to. John, you talked about having a 60-month contract, and Sean, you want to keep these folks as your customers for longer term than that. Do you have any plans, particularly, especially you guys who are the service providers, for managing that technology, or how are you handling that in terms of having something that now may change pretty rapidly in terms of some of your technology partners in this value chain? How, or is it just too new to really have a firm plan for this kind of stuff? You've got. I just, is it a happy enough business model? So if you have to change partners in 3 or 4 years, you're still happy, or how are you looking at that?
We're already seeing it in terms of additional new demands that customers are asking for. And what we've done is that we've said, look, whatever's at the site needs to be something that you really don't have to go out there and replace, that you can upgrade remotely. Okay, so we said, look, once we do an installation on a site, we want to make sure that we're not going back out there to redo something there. And then the view that we've taken on it is that we can always upgrade the software or the services vis-a-vis the software or the delivery point as much as we feel that the marketplace needs to have it upgraded. So it's already, I will tell you, is that once a customer starts seeing and touching and feeling this type of thing, they're going to always want more.
Yeah, and I can tell you from, is this on? All right. I can tell you from an AT&T perspective, I mean, we have customers that are doing this kind of thing. What our goal is to be that integrator that they can come to. We bring the partners in and continue to keep that relationship happy, glowing, that kind of thing, but using our core strengths to do so. So that way we can help them succeed, and then the relationship just continues.
Okay, so you're the not just the network operator, you're the matchmaker in some sense or two, or at least exposing customers to the range of options they have.
Absolutely. As an example, when John came to us, I mean, there was the whole part where we put together the partners, we assisted in putting and architecting the partners, but there's a second side of that too, which was, adding some of the things that we were able to do with John and with other customers, adding the advantage of having AT&T Capital to be able to fund or help fund startup costs, things like that. Having that all be under one vendor so that you have one person to call and say, hey, I've got an issue, or hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah, everybody. When we got started in it, everybody said, John, why in the world do you want AT&T involved in your business? And I just smiled initially because I wasn't really sure. But the truth of the matter is that their view on it with regards to these emerging ideas and this M2M type of an opportunity is, let's help these ideas and these people to be successful. Let's use both their finance. They financed a lot of gateways for us. I will tell you is that they helped with regards to a lot of the development that was done, and then putting together our team that brought the whole dadgum thing to market. So what we ended up with was, instead of a vendor, we ended up with a partner. And I will tell you is that we went through some difficult times putting together a lot of these things just because of the learnings that were involved. But they definitely earned their place at the table. And I can't think of a better place to go to get something launched out than the experience that we had.
Okay.
From my standpoint, taking a look at how do we keep up with the technology, as far as the internet-based portion of that and the data management piece of that, one of the reasons why we went to the outsourced model was for that purpose. We went with somebody that has this as their core business, and it allowed them to be able to keep up with the technology, and they have to do that really as a course of their business to remain viable in that, and so that's going to translate down to us in terms of their ability to be able to stay up with that technology. So, in that case, we're kind of saying, that's your job to stay up with the technology, and if we start falling behind, then we're going to look for somebody else that can keep up with it.
Okay. Looking for another question? There's one over here.
Yeah, hi, I guess this is Richard Roberts with Suncor Energy. I'm just directed to Sean, I guess. I'm a little bit interested in how you guarantee delivery of the signals through to the...
Guarantee as far as what? Just the network itself?
Yeah, and the response time and...
Well, response time, when you're talking about machine-to-machine solutions, they're very, it's obviously a very quick solution. But the network itself, I mean, each one of the gateways, it's hitting multiple, I mean, if you were to just base it down to the basic side, they're hitting multiple cell sites. So you don't necessarily have to worry about one site being down. There's also SMS backup on the solution, so that if there is an issue, you know right away, and you can go ahead and fix it that way. So there is some redundancy built into that. I mean, guaranteeing the solution, we guarantee, I mean, it's just like the rest of our core network.
Okay. And it's not going to be affected by all the cell traffic that comes on when you have an event like that happen?
No, and that's actually something we're working on right now to further that. Is it's looking at being put on separate and machine to machine. Again, remember it's very small packets of data. Okay, so it travels much quicker, and isn't as affected by voice traffic, if you will.
Okay, thanks.
Have y'all ever noticed that if you've ever been offshore in a boat, your phone quits working, about a mile out, 2 miles out, somewhere like that, but your text messaging goes out for 9 or 10, 12 miles, and that's what's happening is that we're using the data network. It's actually a secure data network, and so we've been really happy with the fact that it's that much more reliable, and we're getting that much extra coverage through the various different cell towers.
Yeah, they're on private APNs, so you've got that direct connectivity.
Help us
through
with
the
the
internet.
acronym there, APN.
What is it? An access protocol network? Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a private line basically, so it doesn't touch the public internet.
Okay, looking for another question. Okay, oh, I get it this time. Quickie question, both you folks have really now, you've got your customers' data kind of in the cloud, and yet I didn't hear either of you kind of imply that you presented it that way to the customer. Can you talk about how did you talk about that with your customer in terms of them having data in the cloud? Were there concerns? How did you address the concerns? And I know probably a hospital doesn't care that much about its generator data compared to its medical data, but still, it's probably a question in terms of data ownership. Did that come up in your discussions with customers? And if so, how did you address it?
Yes, there were a lot of questions that came up as far as storing data in the cloud, accessibility to that, and security around that data. And so we've had to pull together and look at the different security protocols that are operated by Industrial Evolution and use those and speaking with the IT departments at our customer base to be able to appease their fears or to allay their fears, really, in terms of having data in the cloud.
John?
Well, we've avoided it. Is that to date is that what happens with electricity data? It's every 15 minutes, and it becomes just a monstrous thing to manage. So what we've done intentionally right now is not retained any of the data over a long period of time. Now, what we see happening in the future, though, when we're ready to attack it, is that there's a lot of value in knowing exactly how a building uses energy. These smart meters that you're hearing about, that's really what that's all about. And there's a lot of value in knowing what to do with that data and how to manipulate it for a customer to help them to be smarter about how they use energy. But we're just taking it one step at a time because we've got all that we can handle with regards to the DLO project.
Okay. Yeah, I would just make a comment myself that I've seen presentations by energy service providers where there was a big, what was really presented to the customer was the deliverable of some kind of energy information integration, and that really took their eyes off some of the questions that they might have had. They could clearly see some value in that integration, and so it wasn't presented as a risk first, it was presented as a benefit. So there's always two sides to the coin. Any other questions? I'm looking for one, and my vision isn't that good. But all right, I've got another one. I really have a lot. So, how is this really relates to John and the electricity business? What's going to be the impact of lower energy prices, especially unconventional gas, on the business model? A lot of business models in energy are getting impacted in low-cost regions of the country. And I don't know how Texas stacks up with the U.S., but the U.S. is kind of a low-cost region globally.
What's happening is that low natural gas prices are creating a huge problem across the nation with regards to power generators because they're just flat not making any money. okay, with low gas prices. But more importantly is that they're not building any new ones. Now, ironically though is that actually plays into the business model that we have, because remember is that the way that we've got it set up is that we're getting paid for people to solve problems when the grid is restricted. And since nobody's building power plants, that problem's becoming a bigger and bigger deal. Then the other thing that's happening is that your renewables, they're adding wind generation and solar all over the country. Well, the problem with those is they never know when the wind's going to stop. Well, when the wind stops, all of a sudden the frequency decays on the grid and you got potential blackouts. So what happens with the DLO product, since it responds so quickly in 8 seconds, is that we can actually provide frequency support. So as crazy as it sounds, these low gas prices, even though they're really detrimental to a lot of the generators of electricity, have actually played to our hand.
Interesting. Interesting. And of course, you have very well-known stories in Texas about the high penetration of wind in the Texas market and how the volatility there has potentially at times threatened the stability of the entire grid.
Right.
I would just maybe ask one more question, but I'm not gonna. There's a question. Good.
Yeah, this is Alex Chatta from ARC. I have a question. Can you incorporate on-site renewables into your technology? For example, wastewater treatment plant having an on-site biogas.
The renewable puzzle on site, okay, you're talking about solar, I assume?
Yeah, or solar, or there's a number of options.
Yeah, it's a different puzzle, okay, in terms of, and different rules apply with regards to that. What I would tell you is that solar, as a general rule, isn't generating enough electricity to really make an impact on the kind of things that we're looking at doing. So we haven't spent a lot of cycles in terms of figuring out how it was that we could incorporate it into the solution.
Okay, looking for any others. Looking for a hand? I'm going to ask one more, maybe one final question, unless somebody gets inspired out there. What kind of things are you doing to kind of look at how this capability, and now you've got this wedge or this stickiness kind of to the customers through these services that you've developed. How are you planning or evolving the new services that might come from this? You talked about that. Are there do you have a plan for that, or are you operating ad hoc, or what's kind of the way you operate those businesses to reevaluate and look at new opportunities now, because you kind of have a hook in the fish now?
From our standpoint, we're looking at other types of solutions that we can provide. I mean, mobile is the big one. Right now, a lot of the customer base that we have is all operating off of desktops, and so they've got that visibility or maybe an iPad. But moving into the mobile space, I think, is another way of maintaining some freshness, if you will, to that, and then allowing also for mobile data entry, I think, is another way of being able to keep that. Keep the hook in there, if you will.
Yeah, so that's kind of what you're looking at?
We're looking at expanding out the ways that we can be able to utilize the data and be able to take advantage of some of those market trends, like the movement into mobile, to be able to do that.
Okay. John, what about you?
We're looking more at what we can do at the site that's different and unique that that can add value. So I mentioned in the speech, the first thing that we found is that this whole concept of putting reliability to a facility that never before had it and getting it to pay for itself. The next one that we kind of came to was, wow, if somebody already has a big generator there, or a backup generator, we can come in and attach the equipment to it and set it up to where that the generator can export power back to the grid, and we could generate twice as much revenue for them as we could before. So kind of what we're doing, as opposed to trying to set up something that is different on the technology side, is more, how can we use the technology platform to create greater value for everybody? And that's kind of how our thinking has evolved.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, I can tell you from an AT&T perspective, you know, ILS and Acclaim, we've got that intelligence now, or that intelligence down there at the site. So it's more about, as John said, expanding what you can do there. So for an example, consider a lot of mud districts with a lot of the copper thefts there's been. You know, how do we layer in a level of camera and bring video into this solution to where when there's movement, it kicks off a video that gets sent and notified. So things like that. But then also to be able to expand that outside of just the Texas and Acclaim market and look at bringing it in as an AT&T product. Okay, and continuing that cycle to be able to grow it and help and move forward that way. But again, even like Charles said, it's all about how you consume that information. And mobile is starting to become more and more of an issue of, not an issue, but an option where it wasn't before, of how you're able to consume and then ultimately control those assets.
Okay. Okay, I'll ask the floor one more time. Anybody have a last question? There's one over here. Just please let us know who you are and go ahead.
Yes, my name is Dave Scheibenhofer. I'm with Mentor Graphics. I have a question for John and maybe Sean about the Open Automated Demand Response Alliance, which a number of utilities are backing, which is the communications between commercial, residential, and utilities directly. Is that a threat to what you're doing, or could actually help in your business model?
The attitude that we're taking is that it's such a broad playing field. Everything is just getting started. I think it's wonderful that some other people are trying to figure this out and trying to figure out how that they can create value for that customer as well as for them. So I don't see any of it as a threat. It's more of a early stage, greenfield as far as I'm concerned at the end of the day.
I would agree. I mean, I don't know much about that particular alliance, but I would agree that the idea is to, if we can figure out the power problem, it helps us all.
Okay. Oh, there's another question. Good.
Chance Lakefact from 3M, and my question is for John. From what I understand, you completely take your customer off the grid and power it with the backup generator. Do you have applications where you can use the backup generator and still get some power from the grid if, I don't know, maybe the generator cannot handle everything for a long period of time?
It depends on how the piece of equipment is set up relative to the property. Okay, is that we've got a lot of them that have only partial backup with a generator, and the rest of the building continues to be coming off of the grid if that's how their breaker system is set up. We have other ones that the generator does the entire building, and then part of the building is just not under generation, so it goes black. We've got a lot of variations of it, and then we actually have a third variation in which the generator is providing power to the facility and then also exporting. So you've got a lot of different ways that it can work, and it depends on how that the building is actually set up or how that they'd like for us to set it up.
Okay. Another question going once. Going twice. Okay, what I'd like to do then, if there are no further questions from the floor, I'm going to be quiet. And now we've had kind of an interesting presentation here to think about the kind of basic things of water quality and electric utility service, and looking at how they may change in the era of the Internet of Things. So let's give a hand to this panel for giving us this perspective.